I need you to knock some sense into me. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I don't know.
I enjoy listening to you. I don't always agree with everything.
All right, enough of this persiflage.
So, you want my question?
I'm certainly not going to get myself in trouble by telling you what to do.
That makes great sense. Gosh, that's good.
Did I overwhelm you with words and wisdom?
I've got 7 kids. I feel like I could call you every day.
Wait, you're telling me I'm wrong?
Yes, I am, Dr. Ray.
You just need to tune in to Dr. Ray, honey. He's got all the answers.
Am I right or am I right?
Probably.
Now, from the studios of Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio, the hometown of Mother Angelica, here's Dr. Ray.
Very nice to have you with me on The Doctor Is In. This is E-Person Monday. Normally I would say email, but I have evolved. I've grown. I like to think of myself as much more linguistically sensitive than I used to be. Email is rather patriarchal. It's rather limiting, cutting out 50% of the population, actually about 52% now, because we guys live riskier lifestyles and we die earlier. But e-person is more umbrella-like. It's a big tent piece of language. It is what it says. I take a look at your missives. No, I can't even say that. That's kind of narrow. Missives, probably should say Ms.-ives, and see what comes in. Come from the TV show, they come from the radio show, and then I will read them and stop periodically after a sentence or two, because I like to read between the lines and speculate as though someone's talking to me. So we shall get to that, but for the moment, the monologue. I will sometimes tease my clients. What would your mother have done had you talked to her the way your daughter is talking to you? No, I didn't talk to my mother that way. Why not? You were a teenage girl once. Teenage girls are so automatically snotty and surly. Why weren't you? Well, I may have felt like it, but I didn't do it very often. Why not? I knew. You knew what? Something would happen. What? I don't know. Why don't you know? It never happened. Why didn't it happen? I never did it. Why didn't you do it? Something would have happened. What? I don't know. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base. It's an Abbott and Costello routine. But it speaks of something. I know many of you listening to me right now either look at your grandkids and perhaps the way they let their emotions and verbal barrage loose on their parents, or you're listening to me now and you have your own kids who do this. And you think to yourself, I didn't do that. Now, I'm sure some of you did, and your memory's a little fuzzy about it, but I do believe it was less common, much less common. Now, why was that? Your parents didn't read a whole bunch of parenting books. They weren't psychologically enlightened like we now are. They didn't have all the developmental psychology books and education. Why was this? Why were you less likely to challenge your parents' authority or to mistreat a parent? And I believe that's a safe statement to make across generations. See, I was conflating two. I wanted to say that's a safe generalization to make across generations. Why? I call it the perception of authority. Somehow, something in you perceived that your parents had authority, and that, if necessary, they were willing to act upon that authority. Which meant they didn't have to do it very often, because you perceived it. If a child does not really perceive that a parent has confident, calm authority, willing to act, They'll push harder. They'll test the boundaries. They'll mistreat. Why? Because it's not so clear. My wife and I reserve some of our strongest discipline for disrespect. We tried hard to respect the kids. Not going to yell at them. Not going to put them down with our words. And we expected. And it wasn't just expectations. It was enforcement. The 2 E's. Expect and enforce. That if you were to do something like this, the consequences would be pretty stringent. Loss of lots of privileges, writing essays, extra chores. And the kids knew this, and they learned it very, very early. And I think there's a parallel with you. You learned it very, very early. That if you were to step over that respect line and get disrespectful, something would happen. And you never really tested it to see what exactly it was. Maybe you learned it a few times and that was enough. And you didn't go there anymore. It wasn't because your parents were necessarily so educated. They weren't psychologically slick. My dad dropped out of high school during World War II. He wasn't what the experts would call psychologically enlightened. But he had an authority to him. When he spoke, I knew he meant it. I knew he was going to enforce it. I didn't push it. When you're clear what's going to happen, if you deliberately defy, and that's really what I'm talking about. I mean, all kids misbehave, and they misbehave out of impulse and immaturity and foolishness and bad judgment, opportunism. Yeah, they do. That's just kidhood. But I'm talking defiance, in-your-face resistance. It's a lot more common now than I think it was 2 generations ago. Definitely 2 generations ago. Maybe not a lot more common than 1 generation ago, but I still think it is. I talk to teachers who've been teaching for 40 years, and they're shocked. They say the difference in the kids, even at the early elementary level, who are just simply flat out willing to challenge the authority of an adult, has skyrocketed in its frequency. So given that, the perception of authority means you discipline less. It's true. If you don't have authority, you're always chasing it. You're always trying to assert it. You're using words, you're using volume, you're using emotions, you're arguing, you're reasoning, you're renegotiating, you're bribing, you're doing everything you can to get cooperation. If you have legitimate authority, you don't discipline anywhere near as much because you don't have to. You've established the expectation from the child. Remember the look? The look is dead now. Parent will look at a child and risk getting a look back that says, "What are you looking at?" The look meant, here is a warning. I am prepared to act if you ignore this look. It was kind of like classical conditioning. Remember Pavlov's dogs? Does his name ring a bell? Pavlov found that dogs salivated to the sight of food, so he did a little experiment. He rang a bell just before presenting the food. After multiple bell food pairings, pretty soon just the bell elicited salivation. I think the look is kind of a classical conditioning. If the look follows action when it's ignored, then pretty soon it's paired with authority. And the look then becomes the discipline, which you don't have to do because you've given a warning. Please stop that behavior. Leave your sister alone. Watch your tone. It's getting close. There's the look. You can just look all over the place. Parents used to look all over. But if there is no authority, the look is meaningless. Veterinarians will tell you that if you are going to control a big dog, you have to have some authoritative demeanor about you. Our Rottweiler, when she comes in to eat, and she looks at me, and she's ecstatic to get that food, but if I stare back at her and I just look at her, she looks at me, and she won't budge until I say okay. Now, she has no idea that she'd be a real threat to me if she decided to unload. Big girl. But somehow in her doggy mind, that look of mine, that stare down, and sometimes she'll turn away. She don't want to keep staring. That the big dog, her master, is asserting his authority. She learned that as a puppy. The perception of authority. If your children perceive you have it, and not in a dictatorial, jackbooted, kick the door down, I'm back, kids, and I'm ticked. No. Authority is ultimately kind, because it gets rid of all the ugliness that can happen when you don't have authority. You get loud, you get nasty, you go to confession, and you say, "Bless me, Father, I'm just such a bad person. I don't talk to anybody the way I talk to my kids." If you have authority, you don't use it very often. That's the great thing about it. And things are a lot more peaceable. When we come back to your e-persons.
I don't think we've replaced our siding since we moved in 20 years ago. But I'm sure it's still fine, right?
We better call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor.
Damaged siding can cause mold buildup and weaken your home structure. Protect your family by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your siding, roof, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Ray Grandy, host of The Doctor Is In, Ave Maria Radio for 20 years. I've been with them, and during that time I've watched them spread our precious faith to anyone, anywhere. Well, also in that time, their equipment, the equipment that they had is cutting edge, no longer is cutting edge. It's kind of like an iPhone 5. We need your help. We absolutely need your help. Visit AveMariaRadio.net. You're not just donating, you're broadcasting hope.
Marcus Peter hosts Unveiling the Covenants.
What is a covenant? It's a vowed exchange of lives which results in an unbreakable family bond. Throughout Scripture, God seeks to espouse all mankind to himself in an unbreakable covenant bond. His covenantal love is a free gift, but it necessitates a response from us. We are free to accept or reject it. Let's learn what this means as we unveil the covenants.
Saturday mornings at 11 and Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. on Ave Maria Radio.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Thank you for joining me here. The Doctor's In. This is E-Person Monday. Let's get to it. Dear Dr. Ray, this is kind of a long story, so here goes. It's a long story because, as I recall reading this, there were two separate scenario issues involved. The one I think I can comment on accurately. The other one I'm not so sure. I need a whole lot more info. Our family was returning home from evening mass. My husband, myself, my two stepsons. We stopped at the store to get groceries, during which I lightheartedly told my husband how my biological son said he would only eat, and then she mentioned something, I don't know what it is, for a dessert because he doesn't like any others. Whereupon, my husband gave me a somewhat disgusted look and told me he doesn't think that's right. There has always been complications with our blended family with children. All 3 boys are 18. Now, see, that's the key line. Anyhow, I felt upset by his reaction. I can have pouty moments, Dr. A, and the need to be alone. All right, let me stop there. One of the very common reasons for second relationships with stepchildren for failing is the children. A common dynamic is that the biological parent, for many reasons, maybe shared custody, maybe fears that the kids won't come to see him or her on the weekends, guilt that the first relationship failed, all of that can enter in to change the discipline style. It can be lax, it can be loose, or in their mind it's fine, but in the step-parent's mind it is not. The step-parent is looking at what's going on and realizing that the kids are just getting too much freedom, too much lax response. I see that all the time. That is so common. My speculation is that's what happened when her husband reacted the way he did, because she said, he'll only eat this for dessert. I could picture her husband thinking, then he doesn't eat dessert. He's interpreting that as, see, you just give him whatever he wants. And now he's 18 and he's obnoxious. I bet that's what's going on. All right. Now, here comes the much more complex situation here. I felt upset, and I needed to be alone. Soon after we were leaving the store, I decided I would walk home. About a 50-minute walk in a safe end-of-town neighborhood in the bright evening light to blow off some steam. Okay, scenario, Mom's upset. Mom basically said, I'm walking home. Now, I would bet that her husband interpreted that as a little bit of a hissy fit. He didn't interpret it as, well, she needs to calm herself down. She needs to settle because she realizes, yeah, I made a good point. No, she's mad. And that's, I think it primed him to be really upset at what he saw was a stunt. When I was about 20 minutes away from home, a man drove by, very slowly, leering at me. He drove away. I didn't think much of it, except that he was perhaps weird, and I just kept walking. A few moments later, I heard his car coming up behind me. As I had recalled a loud rattling sound it made the first time he went by. My heart was now pounding because I knew he was following me. He turned the corner in front of me and stopped in the middle of the road. I didn't know what to do. I had nowhere to hide, so I kept walking. Pulled out my phone to call my husband. He didn't answer. And I would wonder if he was still just kind of upset at the fact that she, more or less, once again yielded to her son's wishes, as he saw she always does. And that was just another one, and it represented her parenting style with him. That's why I think he got so upset over just the idea that the kid only eats one kind of dessert. But then, when she took off, more or less saying, I'm upset at you because you questioned not only me but my son. And he thought, this is standard. She didn't look at me and say, yeah, I agree, you're right. No, she got mad and she left. Okay. Now, so he was already primed. At this moment, I saw that the man's back window was completely broken out, adding to the scariness of the situation. My son, she called her son, immediately left to pick me up and reached me safely. I called my husband moments before I got in my son's car to inform him of what was happening, or what had happened. On our way home, we crossed paths with my husband, and he stopped us to ask where the guy went. But we didn't answer because we were trying to get home quickly, and also didn't really hear what he was saying, and I thought he was just checking to make sure I was safe. Okay, so a misunderstanding there, right? The husband is feeling very protective of his wife. He wants to find this dude somehow, some way. I don't know what he was going to do. Wife didn't give him any kind of answer, and he thought, okay, well, if it's not that important to you, then that's what I think happened. When my husband was gone for a while after my son and I got home as he was looking for the man. When he returned, instead of comforting me and asking me if I was okay, he began to criticize the way my son and I did not tell him which way the guy went and how we did not inform him about all the details. Okay, once again, you see, I think husband was interpreting this as she's an ally with her son. Her son was there to, quote unquote, see her to safety. And when the husband said, I want to do what I can to protect you, he didn't hear either one of them say anything. It was as though they were blocking him. I think that's how he interpreted it. That, okay, so your son, your ally, which should be me, but is not, came to get you, and you didn't think enough to even give me any details about the car, what this guy did, nothing. So I'm sure he interpreted it as you are simply, once again, allying yourself with your son. This was difficult for me to hear as I was shaken up by the event. I could barely think of what to do, let alone explain everything at that moment. When I brought up later how his reaction made me feel, the conversation again, here it is, I knew it, turned to how my son has problems. And how maybe God was telling me to walk away like that again. No, not to walk away like that again when I walked home from the store. There it is. This whole event was, once again, you are allowing the son, which he now sees as a behavior problem, and whatever, immature, whatever it is about him, that he believes she has done a lot of this in her parenting. This is a classic example. She got upset, she walked away, and she shouldn't have, and you saw what happened. I feel very bewildered by my husband's reaction to the whole situation. I don't. It's very understandable. I'm not saying it's good. It seems unusual for him, like there is less love or cherishing or protection of me. We've been married 8 years, and I've had a few rough patches, mostly surrounding the kids. This is, however, the most unsupportive I have ever felt. I don't know what to do. Well, I think it's understandable. Now, I'm not saying it's good and right. I'm saying it's understandable. He interpreted this as just another situation where you allied with your son over him. You didn't think enough at the time to give him details or thank him or anything like that. He was already stinging from the fact that you got out of the car and walked home. He saw that as a pouting, hissy fit. So maybe, you said you apologized, so maybe you can tell him, I was wrong to do that, and maybe you might want to say, for your marriage's sake, what kinds of things do you see me as needing to do different with these boys? Very nice to have you with me. Dr. Ray Guarendi, program Doctor is in, co-production EWTN, Global Catholic Radio Network, and Ave Maria Radio Communications. Andrew Kruchek is my producer man there in Ann Arbor. And the show is, the Doctor is in, but the variant is E-Person Monday, where I look at this stack of E-Persons and see which ones we're going to try to tackle, to use manly language, today. My father was diagnosed with dementia in the summer of I won't give that date. He is still very active and able to live at home at this time. However, my mother has become verbally and emotionally abusive to my father. So much so that we are no longer comfortable leaving him alone with her. Typically, when a spouse does this, some of it is mixed in with their frustration. Why are you like this? Why are you doing this? I've told you this 9 times. You keep asking me. And some of it is fear. The person that they've lived with all these years, who was their partner and companion and perhaps very competent, is now becoming more childlike. And they're frustrated, they're hurt, and they're angry. And sometimes that manifests itself in mistreatment. Now, I don't know if that's the case here, but it's a very common scenario. My mother has been... Okay, hold on, I skipped a line. We fear that my father will someday physically retaliate. Well, if in fact his governor, his inhibition, his self-control is slipping, and she's treating him meanly, that's a possibility. He has also expressed this fear himself. In other words, I'm not sure I'm not going to do something in return, which means he's probably not completely confused. If he has enough insight to say, the way she treats me, one of these times I'm going to react. My mother has been verbally abusive in the past. All right. Is this her style? Or does it come and go with stress or frustrations or bad times in the marriage? If this is her style, indicating perhaps a low frustration tolerance, inability to roll with some of the day-to-day difficulties of marriage, and now having a spouse that is moving into dementia, it would just push her to her very limit. I took her to see a therapist a few years ago. Now, I'm going to assume that she wanted to go see that therapist. I don't know how much persuasion you had to do. The therapist diagnosed her as narcissistic. Okay, I'm certainly not going to quibble with a therapist's diagnosis. But the diagnosis of narcissism is a very serious personality disorder. And for someone to be a narcissist, this is their personality style across the board with pretty much everybody. They are enormously self-absorbed, unable to have much empathy for anyone, unable to see another person's perspective, expecting to be treated in a certain way but operating out of a double standard. And that's across the board. That is a personality ingrained trait, if you will. So if, in fact, her perception of your father's dementia is how it complicates her life and what she has to put up with and endure. But she gets along well at church, and she has friends, and in fact, with her own adult children, she's nowhere near that unpleasant, then I'm not going to quibble with the therapist's diagnosis. But what I am going to say is that her narcissism is very focused. At this time, my siblings and I are not sure if a facility is the right place for my father, and it would be a financial burden for my parents that I'm not sure we could render. He'd be fine living at home. Now, when you say When you say he'd be fine living at home, are you saying he's capable of living at home, or he would be content to live at home if my mother were capable of help with the caregiving? Yeah. I think what's going to happen is your choice may be forced sooner, because if she's not willing to go the extra mile in living, caring for, rolling with, tolerating someone who is deteriorating in their dementia, then you may have to make this choice sooner than later. Under ideal circumstances, if she were more willing and capable of dealing with his dementia, and a lot of spouses are heroic in doing this. I mean, they keep that spouse home until the very, very last minute, physically, cognitively, and emotionally. But if your mom's not one of those, then rather than being angry at her, not going to do you any good to be angry at her, you will make this choice for your dad sooner. And at some point, don't know when that would be, depending upon the progression of the dementia, at some point he will not even be all that aware that he will be being placed in a separate setting. For the meantime, maybe you can bring in some help. You can rotate the siblings. You can pay for some in-home care for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time so that your mom can get away. And in some respects, maybe your dad can get away from her. Those are your options right now. But the reality is, as you describe it, that your mom is not real willing to go the extra mile, and she's getting frustrated fast with his deterioration. And that will bring about you having to make a decision sooner than you otherwise might have had to do if she were more willing to persevere in this. This is tough stuff. This is tough stuff when you get to this point where you have that kind of neurological deterioration, and so much of it comes down to what kind of support system is available.
The opinions, ideas, notions, and intellectual nuggets expressed on The Doctor Is In are not necessarily those of the management staff, call screeners, board operators, mother-in-laws, second cousins once removed, and parole officers of Ave Maria Radio. And any resemblance or close relationship thereof is purely coincidental and is not a reflection or indication that any of the aforementioned individuals are listening to the program or even like it.
You know, they talk about evolution. I don't know. I think there's some places where evolution really falls short. How come mothers have only 2 hands, huh? And they don't have that third eye in the back of their head? If evolution really would be survival of the fittest, natural selection, I would think that would be. This is Dr. A here, the program The Doctor Is In. This is ePerson Monday. Let's get to it some more. Our 6 children came home from public school and university. Now, I think this is someone from Canada, because that's what they call college in Canada, university, when COVID hit. My husband and I decided to keep the 3 youngest children at home for the school year. Our oldest went back to university in the fall. Our 2 middle oldest went back to their public school in January. What do I do if the kids want to all go back to public school? Well, I guess my response to that is, I'm not sure what you mean. What do I do? Are you saying, how do I convince them? Or are you saying, do I have the right to say that we're going to homeschool our 3 youngest? You do have that decision as a parent. Now, if you're saying, Well, they might not like it. Well, you don't know how long they won't like it. After 6 months, they might love it. Not having to get up at 7 in the morning, getting up at 8, and getting their work done by 11, and having the rest of the day free, and not having to do homework at night. I mean, it's going to evolve. I'd like to even keep all the youngest four at home, and she capitalized all. Our oldest is graduating university next week. Next in line will be a senior in high school next school year. So what she's saying is, okay, we've got one graduating from college, one graduating from high school. All right? But she wants to homeschool the four younger ones. That's her decision. How do we fight that battle, which it has become? Well, I guess I'm going to say you don't have to fight the battle. And by that, I do not mean you send them to whatever school they wish. It's not a battle. It's a decision. If you think, as a parent, I'm going to assume two things. One, you're older than your kids. And two, you're smarter than your kids. So if you think that it is to their benefit to be homeschooled, then you do so. I think they'll push on you a lot harder, and this is going back to my monologue of authority. Once they perceive that this is your decision and it is the way it will be for their benefit and your family's benefit, once they perceive that, they'll quit pushing as hard. Right now they're pushing because they see you wobbling. If you think it's best, in your parental judgment, if you think this is best, you don't worry about some kind of psychological scars by having them at home. They may not like it for a while, but I think they'll come to really like it. And furthermore, for example, if you say it'll be a battle because they won't do the work, well, we had a simple rule in our house that, again, we didn't have to enforce it very often because it was an understood rule. Schoolwork is completed before any privileges of any kind begin. It's that simple. And though they were very quick to get their schoolwork done, or at least at the level they were capable of, this is your decision. If you think it's a good one, you make it. You do not allow the resistance of a 9-year-old to say, I don't want this. Because they don't know ultimately what's best for them. You do. The number one reason a lot of parents who wish to homeschool don't is exactly what you're saying. Discipline. And there's a certain irony to that, is there not? Example. A teacher who may have 22 children doesn't have a fraction of the authority of a parent. But yet, the children perceive, at least the bulk of the children, perceive that teacher has the authority. You, on the other hand, do not have 22 children. You're going to have 4 at home. And you have authority that absolutely dwarfs a teacher's. She can't assign an essay for disrespect. She's not allowed. She can't make a child stand in a corner. She's not allowed. She has virtually no discipline leverage. But yet the kids are more likely to cooperate with her than with you. Why? Because they perceive that you're not sure in your authority. If you simply say, kids, this is what we're going to do, it's going to work out, there'll be a lot of benefits for you, here they are. If you don't like them, well, let's hope you adjust, because this is the direction we're heading in. This is what we're going to do. I did my 3%. My wife did the bulk of our homeschooling by far. The 2 older children went to school through 2nd and 1st grade. Then we decided to homeschool. How did they react? There was a little resistance at first. But within several months, they liked it a lot because they were done by 11 o'clock with the same amount of work, if not more. They didn't have schoolwork to do at night. They didn't get home at 3:30, have to get up at 6:30. That didn't happen. We had much more flexibility in our schedules. We could go places and do things. We used to go to Myrtle Beach in the off-season when everything was so cheap and there weren't lines at the restaurants. They loved it. We'd go in October. They were in school. We couldn't do any of that. We had maximum flexibility in our family life. So I would suggest to you, you make this decision. Now, here comes more of it. As my daughter said yesterday, now I don't know which daughter this was. Maybe it's the one who went to college. Homeschooled kids are just not socialized, the big S word. And that's not true. If you look at the research, they're more socialized than their peer counterparts. And they certainly are more academically competent than their peer counterparts. I beg to differ, she says. But how do we put our foot down and keep it down? How do we keep strong when we are grossly outnumbered? You're not gross. Mom, you are not grossly outnumbered. You could have 10 kids. We had 10 kids. We were terribly outnumbered, just in numbers. But we were not outnumbered in parenthood and in our decisions. We had authority. They didn't have authority. Not a matter of being outnumbered, Mom. It's a matter of you confidently deciding what you wish to do for your kids' welfare as you see it. Socialized to what, as Bill Bennett would say? Socialized to what? Your kids are not going to grow up in a vacuum. They're going to have friends. They're going to go to church. They're going to go and there's all kinds of homeschool groups. There's activities they can go through the local schools like our kids did. There's so many options now. You're not sitting in a cabin somewhere out in the woods with no human beings within 5 miles. That's not going to happen. And I guess I would ask this question. How were children socialized before the advent of public education? They were socialized by their parents and the people around them, their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents. And even though family ties are not that cohesive anymore, there's still a lot of grown-ups in their lives. And they got siblings. They're not growing up in a vacuum. It's all going to come down to your confidence and your decision about this. And they're going to perceive that. And also enforcing your rules. Schoolwork has to be completed, where no privileges at all begin. That is our house rule. I'm Dr. Ray.
I don't think we've replaced our siding since we moved in 20 years ago. But I'm sure it's still fine, right?
We better call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor.
Damaged siding can cause mold buildup and weaken your home structure. Protect your family by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your siding, roof, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916.
Archbishop Ellen Vigneron once said, "We want to understand things deeply so we can share them simply." I believe that applies to understanding our gifts, both natural talents and charisms. God gifts us natural talents for our personal use in our careers and vocations. The Holy Spirit blesses us with charisms upon our baptism and confirmation to be shared as ways to evangelize the faith. We want to understand these gifts deeply in order to share them simply. As Scripture reads in 1 Peter, each of you received a gift. Employ it for one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one utters oracles of God. Whoever renders service as one renders it by the strength which God supplies. My coach's question is this: how are you using your gifts today to glorify God and for the greater good? This has been a Christ-Centered Communication Message. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, a communications evangelist and host of Epiphany.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Ray Graney, host of The Doctor is In. Ave Maria Radio has been putting out fabulous Catholic teaching, but the equipment we've got is aged. Like me, needs a lot of help. Some of the stuff is just hard to replace anymore. If you go to AveMariaRadio.net, please, for a donation for the equipment to reach much farther. You're not just donating, you're broadcasting hope. One last e-person question, relatively straightforward, relates to me when I was in college. I was 19 years old. I'll give you a little backdrop. I was 19, and at that time I was playing the organ in supper clubs, so that typically, on the weekends especially, you play till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, now I started at 9. Now I think I'd be half asleep by 9. But the question here is this. Should I give my 22 and 19-year-old sons a curfew? Now the question becomes, what time? Well, she gave me the time. 2 a.m. Whoa, I think that's pretty generous, even for 22 and 19. She says they both attend college out of town, but are home for the summer and for the holidays. Well, I've had a lot of parents tell me I can fall asleep when I hear that lock turn and my kids are in the house. And some parents will say, you know, my comfort here, my peace of mind is a consideration. Well, first of all, I think if you want my opinion, that's all you're asking for, because there isn't necessarily any specific ground rule for this. I think 2 a.m. is very generous, especially for 19. Wow. I remember one time I was at a party. It was summer between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I was at a party. And there was a really cute girl there, and we were talking, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And I got home at 4:30 in the morning. Oh. Well, Papa's already asleep. So I thought, okay, I'll go in the back door. I'll get in, I'll sneak in, and I'll fall asleep on the couch in the family room. Cool. Worked once. Ought to try it again. I did. Yep, a couple weeks later, same girl, same late. Worked again. Third time was not the charm. I got caught. Dad gave me a 12 a.m. curfew. I remember arguing, Dad, I don't have a curfew when I'm at college. He goes, no, you don't. But you do here. 12 a.m. I was 19. I was a big boy. Had a curfew. So if you're asking me, Laura, should you, I'm going to ask you, is this your decision as a parent? See, when you say, should I give, you're basically saying there's some kind of ground rule out there where you can poll 100 psychologists and find out which one of them think it's legit. No, you're the mom. If you think that a curfew when you're here at home is how we run the family, that's your business. I'm not saying they're going to like it. Because if you're asking, will they like it, I'm going to say they won't. What kid would? Wanting to come in? But I think 2 a.m., you are being very flexible. And I would wonder if they argue with that, maybe you might want to reconsider making it earlier. Now, the 22-year-old might be a different ball game. Sounds like this 22-year-old's getting close to graduating from college. So you may say, I'm going to trust you not to abuse coming in. But if you did like Dr. Ray did, 3 weeks in a row, came in at 4 a.m., then that's abusing it. So yeah, maybe with the 22-year-old you can say, no curfew, but don't abuse it. What's abusing it? Consistently coming in after 1 o'clock. So that's one option for the 22. For the 19-year-old, his first year away from home, so he probably, as the song said, how you going to keep him down on the farm after they've seen Paris? He's probably feeling he can fly when he's at school, but you can't know, and that's right. But when he's at home, you can say, oh, Mom, and I just breathe easier when I know my boys are safely in the house. Thank you for joining me here. Thank you, Andy Kruchek, for all you do there at Ann Arbor. Tomorrow, good Lord permitting, talk to you ear to ear on The Doctor Is In. Walk with God. No curfew in walking with God. That's all the time.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.